So the thing that's been a problem with Trump's policies is that he says, okay, we're going to exempt Social Security income from federal income taxes. And mind you, I want to get rid of federal income taxes. I'd rather have a consumption-based tax that's flat, but we're unlikely to get there anytime soon, maybe one day. Hello, welcome again to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. Well, today we've got a lot to go through, so let's just jump right into it and get straight to the facts that you need to know for this week. So, number one, presidential candidates' impact on Social Security. In the news, a report from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget warns that another Trump presidency could lead to the Social Security Trust Fund depleted within 6 years. A Harris presidency is projected to maintain the current trajectory. The report cites tax exemptions and tariffs as key policy influencing the trust fund's shortfall. So look, when it comes to quote unquote entitlements, I don't like to call them entitlements because we're not entitled to anything. They're really mandatory outlays or really welfare programs at the end of the day. Because to think about it, whenever Social Security was created back in 1935, it was to help out those who were retirees, right? And so ultimately that kept in place even after the Great Depression, even though it should have been a temporary program. But as Milton Friedman says, there's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. And so we're still having to deal with these issues today. And just like with Medicare that I've talked about before, having a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 workers paying in to every one beneficiary, whenever it was created, we had something similar many years ago with Social Security. And now it's about 2-to-1, as there's not as many workers compared to the number of retirees from the baby boomers retiring and everything else. And so it's a totally different situation, and we're running into insolvency programs with these massive welfare programs. So the thing that's been a problem with Trump's policies is that he says, okay, we're going to exempt Social Security income from federal income taxes. And mind you, I want to get rid of federal income taxes. I'd rather have a consumption-based tax that's flat, but we're unlikely to get there anytime soon, maybe one day, okay? But instead, we should have a flat income tax that's the broadest base possible, and maybe have a higher standard deduction or something like that. But at the end of the day, you want the broadest base, lowest rates, flat rate, too many brackets that we have going on today, okay? And so by exempting that Social Security income, which would exempt about 40% of Social Security payees who are paying into the system today, you also deplete the amount of revenue that would go in potentially to Social Security Trust Fund. Therefore, we're depleting it even faster. And that's why the CRFB shows that it could deplete it in 6 years. But remember, things that I've looked at before with Harris's plan, she also wants Medicare for all, and she wants amnesty of illegal immigrants. That could lead to an additional $2 trillion on the current on Medicare for all, just for the illegal immigrants part of it, adding them to the system. But if you look at Medicare for all in total, it would cost $44 trillion. These are just unsustainable. There's no way to pay for that, whether you tax the rich or whoever. And so these mandatory programs are likely to go insolvent, especially at a time when we have $35 trillion in national debt. They should do something sooner rather than later with these large welfare programs, Social Security and Medicare. They should look to places like Chile and Finland and the Netherlands and other places that have privatized these sort of things and given more control to people and not to government. That's really where we should head. But unfortunately, the politics are unlikely to get us there anytime soon. So that's that. Number 2, Fed rate cut mistake. In the news, after the recent Federal Reserve's interest rate cut, the economy continues to run hot, raising questions about the necessity of the cut. Stocks are hitting new records, and the 10-year Treasury note rate yield has risen to 4.1%. Contrary to some expectations that the cut would lower mortgage rates, the average 30-year mortgage rate has increased to 6.4%, reaching closer to 7%. Look, I've talked about this before, and I'm still on this diatribe. I'm going to keep drumming it. All right, I'm a drummer, so I'm going to keep drumming it. Is that we're repeating the same mistakes that we had during the 1970s when they cut the federal funds rate too fast. They pumped more money into the economy like they're doing today. And what we saw was that inflation went up higher than it did before. You would hope that we've learned these lessons, but throughout history, we've had this repeated mistakes, insanity, if you will, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And that's exactly what's happening here. So mortgage rates are rising as they're connected to the 10-year Treasury note rate, and we're likely to see that continue for a while, even as what I think think we have is a bubble in the housing market as a lot of people are locked into their homes. They don't want to refinance. They don't want to move. You have to get a higher interest rate and pay more for a house. So why would you move? So supply isn't getting on the market as much as it otherwise would, leading to higher prices. Once those things start to correct and government failures get out of the way, which lowering interest rates would be more of a government failure here, we'll see the market correct pretty quickly. But that could take a while. So I think the Federal Reserve should hold off from cutting interest rates anymore this year. They probably will cut them again, but I think that they shouldn't because we're going to repeat the same mistakes that we had in the past, okay? So number 3, shift to buying condos and townhomes. In the news, with rising housing costs, more Americans are considering alternatives like condominiums and townhomes. The Washington Post questions whether the American dream should shift to these more affordable options, while a Zillow report shows that builders are responding by constructing more attached single-family homes. Although home construction has declined for the second straight year, it remains above pre-pandemic levels. My take is the housing market, we've had the multi-family housing options is encouraging. Overall housing costs remain too high, and local regulations, restrictive zoning laws, and burdensome permitting processes are hindering the construction and allowing for more housing prices to go down, more houses being built, right? So housing prices are remaining higher than they otherwise would, and this is creating home affordability issues, and it will for a while. Of course, the general level of prices was crept up or pushed up by the Federal Reserve's bad policies of keeping interest rates too low for too long and pumping way too much money in the economy. When their balance sheet increased from $4 trillion to $9 trillion, it's back down to $7 trillion, but it's still way too much. What we really need is to have more housing, right? We need more supply. And this isn't a market failure. This is a government failure given all the situation that's going on. Too much demand, chasing too few houses. Now the housing supply can't catch up because a lot of the restrictions that are put in place on the supply of housing. We don't need as much NIMBY, not in my backyard. We need YIMBY, yes, in my backyard, so we can have more supply of housing. If you look at Houston has very little zoning and other restrictions. It allows for more supply of housing to be developed. Some say they don't like it there. Well, then don't move there. But it does allow for more housing to be created overall, okay? The next one is number 4, tax increase for childcare. In the news, Travis County, Texas, which is where Austin is, okay, is voting on a property tax increase to subsidize childcare for low-income families. If passed, the average homeowner could see an additional $126 in annual property taxes, with subsidies going to families earning 85% or less of the median family income. Look, my take on this is that what you're seeing here is that this is a good idea in the sense of allowing for citizens to vote in the community, to see if they want to provide tax breaks for those individuals, especially at a time when child care costs have been through the roof. I know I've got 3 kids. I see that the cost of this is going up tremendously. But we got to remember that this also came up from the general level of prices, from the Fed printing too much money, Congress overspending. And so that contributed to a lot of the problems. Now we don't want to exacerbate the problem, make the situation worse by adding more government fuel to this fire. That's the government failure that's going on, is we have too high property taxes. We have too many restrictions on child care, and the licensing and other restrictions that are in place drive up the cost. Yes, we all want the best people to care for our kids. Yes, we want the safest facilities, but that happens through marketplaces, not through more government involvement. More government involvement is going to lead to higher taxes where everyone pays for child care. And even though they're not even getting this, we already have that problem with healthcare and education of a third-party payer problem. Let's not make that in child care as well. It's already bad enough, okay? We need less government involvement in child care. The next one, number 5 here, Biden-Harris student loan forgiveness. In the news, Biden announces that more than 1 million public service workers have had their student loan debt forgiveness under his administration. An additional $4.5 billion has been forgiven, according to the president. More than $73 billion in student loans have been forgiven under a 2007 initiative, according to the Education Department. My take is this has been a huge redistribution scheme. We have higher prices across the board, and they're trying to find ways to help those who have a lot of student loans, which was me, okay, and my wife too. But at the same time, they're trying to shift the cost to those who don't have these student loans, maybe who didn't even go to college, and then you're having to pay for that as well. And so this is a huge redistribution scheme from the have-nots to the haves, really, because on average, those people who get a college degree also make a lot more in income per year, and they're forcing the cost on those taxes on lower income people in the process. This is not a good situation. Those people, like me, went to get an education, had to take out student loans. I also had some Pell Grants, right? I paid for it myself. I had jobs along the way. My parents are pretty poor. They didn't have income to help me out with college and everything. And I took advantage of those student loans and Pell Grants that were available to me. But I think that the government's already way too involved in creating demand for many of these programs now that are just woke and brainwashing people into not good ideas for the future. And so we don't need to be celebrating that more and redistributing income to pay for those decisions. I don't even say they're bad decisions. I took out student loans knowing I was going to have to pay it back later. Other people do that too. And they should make sure that we uphold those contracts. That's a part of one of the rules of government. And this was a contract that was made. In fact, the Department of Education should get out of the business of student loans and privatize it entirely. That shift happened during the Obama administration and made the situation worse. We need less government involvement, not more, okay? So let's get out of this debt forgiveness trap. Number 6, September jobs report, red versus blue states. In the news, in the latest September 2024 jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it highlights stark differences in state-level employment. Texas led the nation with 327,400 new jobs, outpacing California's 265,300 over the last year. States like South Dakota had the lowest unemployment rate at 2%. In comparison, Nevada and the District of Columbia faced the highest rates at 5.6% and 5.7% respectively, signaling a significant divide between red states and blue states in job creation and economic performance. My take is that economic growth continues to happen in red states. Texas had a 2.3% job growth rate over the last year compared to California's 1.5%. Texas has an unemployment rate of 4.1%, right around the national average, compared to California's 5.3%, right? And there have been a lot of people who have dropped out of the labor force or left California, and so that has brought down the unemployment rate, but they still have a higher one because there's not as many jobs being created because of big government policies in the way. And one of those has been in the energy policy realm. They have a huge regulatory approach in energy, such as controlling the quantity for gasoline, right? That distorts the overall markets and makes the situation worse in their energy market compared to places like Texas. Texas does a lot of problems that I've talked about: too much government spending and regulation and taxes, especially property taxes, which they should eliminate. But there's a lot of things that are done right, relatively speaking, and so that's one reason why I expect for red states to continue to do better. And if you just look at Texas and Florida, those two states alone have been the real reason why there's been so many jobs that have been created during the Biden administration. It's not the California and New York and Illinois of the world. It's from those red states instead, even though he likes to tout the jobs. Let's see where they're coming from. All right. So number 7, CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau's financial data rule concerns. In the news, the CFPB's proposed Section 1033 rule aims to give consumers more control over their financial data, making it easier for them to switch banks or use fintech services. By standardizing data sharing practices, the rule intends to create a more competitive marketplace where consumers can, quote unquote, walk away from poor service or high fees. However, data privacy and security concerns arise, particularly for third-party fintech companies that don't operate under the same regulatory standards as banks. My take on this is that we need to let the markets work. The rule offers the potential for greater consumer choice by allowing easier access to better services, but the free market, not government intervention, should drive competition and innovation in the financial sector. We need to avoid regulation, as excessive government oversight stifles fintech innovation and limits the variety of consumer services that are available. Allowing competition to flourish organically will provide better options and lower cost. Consumer choices and protection is the way to go, right? A competitive marketplace can protect consumers through innovation and efficiency without heavy-handed government involvement. The focus should be empowering consumers to make informed decisions rather than adding unnecessary regulations, limiting their options. That's what free market capitalism does, okay? Free market capitalism is a way to get government out of the way, allow for us to have as much liberty and freedom to make the choices that we want under the rules of the game, where government is the referee, not an active participant. And if we could do that, we're going to have much more liberty and prosperity. That's what's happened everywhere it's been tried. Unfortunately, where socialism's been tried, and some say, well, it's never really been tried, but the places where it's at least been moved in that direction have failed. And we should not be heading in that direction of bigger government throughout our lives and the economy and everything else, right? That's just not the direction to let people prosper. So I appreciate you joining me today. Please go out and give me a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to share this with your friends and family. And God bless you. And until next time, let people prosper.